Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Goin Digital Show, the podcast for K-12 school leaders. I'm your host, Greg Goins, and this is episode number 15, Creating Model Schools. And tonight we have some big-time guests in the house with us, with Eric Sheninger and Dwight Carter, who will join me tonight to talk about digital leadership and best practices for creating model schools in your school districts. I want to welcome everyone watching live tonight on the TeachCal network at teachcal.com. If you want to send us a question or a comment, you can always participate with the EduLive hashtag. If you can't watch the live show tonight, you can always find the Goin Digital Show on demand on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher Radio. So let's kick things off tonight as we welcome in Eric Sheninger and Dwight Carter, two amazing school leaders and advocates for reimagined schools. Eric Sheninger is a former award-winning principal at New Milford High School, New Jersey. He's the author of two amazing books for school leaders, Digital Leadership, Changing Paradigms for Changing Times, and Uncommon Learning, Creating Schools that Work for Kids. He's currently a senior fellow and thought leader on digital leadership with the International Center for Leadership and Education. He travels the world as an international keynote speaker to spread the message of creating better schools for kids. Dwight Carter is an award-winning school leader as well. He's also a speaker, an author. He currently serves as the principal at New Albany High School in Ohio. His new book is titled What's in Your Space? 5 Steps to Better School and Classroom Design, and that book will be out any day now, so we're looking forward to the release. So with that, guys, a big welcome to the Goin Digital Show.
Thank you for having us, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Appreciate that.
Eric, I want to start with you. I know that you spend a lot of time on the road and you spend a lot of time out talking about both of your books and your experience as a successful high school principal. But I just want to begin by offering a heartfelt thank you from myself and all my colleagues and school leaders out there. You've inspired so many of us to kind of think outside the box and change the way we think about schools. So if we could, let's just talk a little bit about your experience as a high school principal and this whole idea, if you can take us back a little bit, of writing the book about digital leadership.
Well, first I want to say that there's no thanks needed. You know, I think that as educators that go into administration, we're all servant leaders. And ultimately what we're trying to do is refine our craft, do what's best for kids, and really create vibrant cultures of teaching and learning. And I think back to how I was not really going down the right path as a school leader. You know, as a young principal prior to 2009, I didn't believe in anything that I write about, that I talk about. I was the problem. I was the naysayer, the antagonist. If I had a blindfold, it would be on perpetually, and I was not going to really change because I didn't believe in any of this. And it wasn't until the little blue bird started chirping in my ear, I read an article, got online, and started connecting. And really, the power of connectivity, being able to connect to people, to information, but that wasn't happening for me because my reality was my silo, which was my school, which unfortunately is still the reality for many administrators across the country and across the world. But as I became connected, I realized not only how much I did not know, but how my school was not really serving students to the best of our ability. We were failing our kids. And as I shifted my behavior from communicator to learner, I just began to learn how to unlearn and relearn everything I was taught. And it really was, Greg, I'll tell you, it was trial by error. I was looking at my professional practice, looking at what I did day to day as a school leader, and tried to figure out, you know what? I already work hard. All educators work hard. It's time for me to work smarter and in turn get better results. So I was finding ways in which digital tools could be seamlessly integrated through various facets of my professional practice. And I started then to see, you know what, okay, here's how I can communicate more effectively. Here's how we can begin to build a better foundation for student learning involved in critical digital pedagogies. Here's how we can start, redesigning our learning spaces thanks to being connected to my friends and my good friend here, Dwight Carter. Here's how we can tell our story and become the storyteller in chief and really, share all the great things happening, building a positive brand presence. And it was at work, the work that we do every single day, Greg, the work that you do, the work that Dwight does, the work that all of us do, when I made that connection to how digital could help me be more effective and efficient, that's what formed the basis for my book, Digital Leadership. And digital leadership, I shouldn't even call it my book. It's a culmination of the work of my teachers, my students, my staff, and educators and leaders across the world who have decided to buck the status quo, that we must begin to do things differently because students expect different and they expect better.
And we referenced the book, which I think is a must-have for every school leader. But I also remember the first time I was able to watch the TED Talk that you gave, and those came out, pretty close to the same time, I believe. How has your life really changed professionally and personally, even after those two things have been made available to the public as you continue to go out and talk about these things?
Well, personally, my wife has just resorted to rolling the eyes with any type of thing that has to do with social media, books. I mean, my wife is my foundation. I mean, she allows me to do all the work that I'm able to do, so I'm indebted to her. But professionally, as we were talking off air, it's a little odd because I'm no different than any other educator that has the student's best interest in mind. And for me, professionally, yeah, it's put my name out there, it's put the work out there, but what people seem to forget is, I'm no different than anyone else. I'm not a rock star. People might not even be a thought leader. What I'm trying to do and did was focus on becoming a better leader, a better educator, and a better person. And I think the connectedness and the sort of how digital really helps support and enhance the work that I did really is, I think just a testament to the possibilities that are out there for every single educator. It's not about us, seeking notoriety. It's not about being rock stars. It's not about, putting out, oh, I did this, I did that. It's really, helping elevate the profession that needs to be elevated more than ever. And I just think that with my role now and the position that I'm in, I'm just fortunate to be able to use technology to not only share lessons that I learned, but to share the work of amazing educators from all over the world. So from a professional standpoint, I honestly say it's humbled me a great deal because I never thought I'd be in this position. I never thought I'd leave the principalship. I didn't want to leave the principalship. But in that, I think now that I have a responsibility to try to connect and engage with as many leaders and educators as possible to show them the power of telling their story, showcasing their work, and really providing the best ideas, strategies from the true experts in the field of education. And that's practitioners. That's the people like you, Greg, and Dwight, that are doing the work day in, day out. You're faced with the pressures, the realities of the job, and think about the power of getting more and more practitioners into our shared sandbox where we collectively get to elicit support, provide feedback, and just make education the best profession that it can possibly be.
And Dwight, I want to bring you in. When I think about digital leaders and I think about high school principals and superintendents doing amazing things throughout the country, you're one of the names that quickly jumps off the page. You've had an amazing run the last several years as a principal at a couple different schools. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience as a building leader and how have you evolved as a digital leader over the last few years?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. And honestly, my evolution came because I found Eric Sheninger on Twitter. I was not a fan of Twitter by any stretch of the imagination at all, because I'd never heard anything positive about it. And then we were building a new facility at Lincoln High School, and in preparation for that new facility, we went through a 3-day social media boot camp that was powerful. And that boot camp exposed me to Web 2.0 tools, Twitter being one of them. And our trainers exposed me to a number of educators, principals who were already using it. And it was at that moment like the scales removed from my eyes, and I was able to see how it became a useful tool to just, as Eric talked about, share your story, highlight your students and staff, and basically just put your information out there and be vulnerable. And so I was able to model and have teachers that model different types of tactics to engage the learners, engage our stakeholders, ask questions, expand our learning network, and then just share our work. And then from there, things just really started to take off. Schools started to get much more national recognition. We built a state-of-the-art facility that people are still in awe that it exists and that it's actually a high school building. And so that increased the confidence to share what we're doing and what we were doing on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that came to mind as all this was happening was that I shifted my mind from shutting everything down to opening things up, because if we taught kids how to use it appropriately, meaning the technology, then they would use it appropriately. And a telltale sign was this. One day I was walking down the hall, and I saw a student texting and whatnot, and he looked at me as if he wasn't supposed to do it. And his friend said, "Mr. Carter just saw you with the phone." And I said, "Guys, you're allowed to use it." And the student said to me, "You took away the fun of it." And I was like, "What did you mean?" He said, when we couldn't use it, it was fun to try to sneak, but now we can use it, so it's not fun anymore. It's not a novelty. And when that happened, I knew we were onto something big. The kids understood what we were trying to do, and they helped truly become our storytellers.
And we all know that change can be very difficult in any organization or environment. And in public education, it seems to be even more challenging. And Dwight, I listened to a podcast, and you were a guest on not too long ago, and you talked about the fact that the greatest barrier to change is our memory.
Yeah.
And the fact that everyone has their own school experience, everyone remembers what the traditional school experience was like,
Yeah.
and maybe that's why we have such difficulty moving people in a different direction. Can you both talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Most Likely to Succeed?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's one thing that I think Sal Khan talks about. He said the Council of 10 in 1892 established our curriculum, and it hasn't changed much since. That's astounding to me, that a council of 10 men can decide English, math, science, and social studies will be departmentalized, and that's how school will be functioned, and it stays that way. And so our system is set up in a sense where adults who experienced it for 13 plus years think they have the answers on how it should go, and those adults don't look to the professional educators to say, how do kids learn best? What do you know about kids? And what do you know about brain research for today's kids? Our system is set up for yesterday's kids because of our experience, not today's kids based on Gen Z being social, mobile, connected, collaborative, and they're designers and thinkers. And their attention spans are extremely short, but yet we have them sitting in classes for 47 minutes to 60 minutes and basically not have to answer a question but once every 35 minutes. They're used to making decisions every 2 to 3 seconds, playing games, and like Eric's son with Minecraft. They're creating videos, they're creating content to share with their friends on how to break through certain levels of learning. We need to embrace that, tackle that, and harness that power by allowing them to use the technology. And we can start doing that by asking questions as opposed to thinking like we always have to have the answers. So our nostalgia of what school was like when we were growing up is at times hinders our opportunity to see what we can do differently for today's kids.
Very well said. Eric?
And I'll say that the problem's a little bit more systemic than that. When you think about society, it's changing rapidly, most of which because of technology. The landscape in our classrooms is changing because of technology. The learner, it's not that the learner has changed, the environment in which they learn is dramatically different. But what's has not changed is our system. So when students walk through our buildings, there's an automatic disconnect because the school world is the exact opposite of the real world. And I'll say, sort of piggybacking on what Dwight said, our problem is we teach the way we were taught. We lead the way we were led. And what's happened is this sort of protection of the status quo, where, what is school based on? Control, compliance, conformity, rules. And it's because of those elements that we see a resistance to change. And, if it's not broke, why fix it? This is just going to pass. And what's happened is, we haven't really focused, not even really on the technology, but creating a school that is going to prepare kids with the skills, the mindset, the ability to solve problems that ultimately we need in a world that is going to be faced with a slew of real-world problems in our lifetime. We need the next generation of kids to be the next generation of thinkers, doers, inventors, and creators. And I think we need to ask ourselves, how well is our school? How well is our instruction? How well are our policies really creating a culture of learning? And the thing, too, is, when we see with technology, technology, there's so many benefits. Obviously, Dwight and I are huge advocates. Mm-hmm. But from an educational perspective, there's nothing radically transformational about technology. Technology is a tool. The transformational aspect of technology is how students, how teachers, how leaders use that technology first and foremost to support and enhance their own learning, and then from an educator perspective, how it's used to improve professional practice. So we really need this paradigm shift that I discuss in my book, Digital Leadership, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's changing the mindset, but it's not just about talking about mindset. It's when we change, how do we make sure that change is sustainable, that leads to transformation? And what are those indicators of success? How do we measure whether teaching and learning is actually changing? So I think these are some important questions. As Dwight said, that we've got to ask important questions. We want our kids to ask important questions, but we need to be more reflective as educators. And this was the sort of eye-opening moment for me when I learned that my school worked better for the adults than it did our kids. That is a problem. And today, too many schools work better for adults than they do for our kids. We need to not only create schools that work for kids, but create a culture of learning that has substance, that's going to allow kids to create artifacts of learning to demonstrate conceptual mastery in a variety of ways, honoring student voice, choice, agency, empowering educators to take calculated risks, to learn from failure. And I can go on and on. But it just goes back to sort of what Dwight was talking about, is that we need change on multiple levels. We have to stop talking about change. So many people talk about change. We need to go and do it. And really cite those examples where it's being done in places that have challenges, that are economically challenged, that are in rural, that are in urban, that have issues where the budget is not to where it needs to be. So, less talk, more action.
And the TED Talk you gave that I referenced at the opening of the show was called Schools That Work for Kids. And one of the things you said that really struck me was, you said if we're going to create better schools, they have to be relevant, meaningful, and engaging. Can you talk a little bit about the relevant and the meaningful? How do we decide what's relevant and meaningful, Eric?
I think you're asking the wrong question, Greg. It's not how do we decide what's relevant and meaningful. How do our kids decide what's relevant and meaningful? And that is the conundrum that we have in our schools. Everything is directed by the adults. We have so many layers of bureaucracy, so many layers of red tape, and what happens is what's in the best interest of the student is typically lost. The adults have to, help to create that shared vision, but the one missing piece is our number one stakeholder and our ultimate boss, which is our kids. So how do we make them part of the solution? and not always see them as potentially part of the problem. So I think for us is, relevant, meaningful, it's based on student interests. It's based on student passions. It's based on work or careers and higher education that kids are interested in. And that's the thing. It's like, everyone throws this, phrase around, but it's true. We're preparing kids for a world that we have no idea what it's going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now. So when we look at all these trends in education that are starting to really come to the forefront, whether it be virtual reality, augmented reality, gamification, micro-credentials, digital badging, how do we bring our students into the fold and help them co-create a learning environment and a system that not only works better for them, but where they're pushed to solve problems, where they come, they identify the problem, they come up with a solution. Even when they're confronted with perplexing unknowns, they have the tenacity to, persevere, push through, and really not get deterred. That really understand that, they're not always going to get the answer right the first time. But our system is not geared for that. But I think first and foremost, going back to, the whole question is, we have to, allow our kids to voice more opinions and perspective as to what's valuable and meaningful for them, as opposed to us, always making it about what's easier for us and pushing down our values and what we think is important, which really is the problem in schools. What we think is important is totally irrelevant to our kids today.
And Dwight, as a high school principal, it sounds a little overwhelming at times, but how do we go about preparing kids for an unknown future as the leader of that school?
Well, what I encourage my staff to do is to, and this is when I was at Gehenna and also now at New Albany, is through our content, because the content is what we're teaching, but we have to focus on skill development. So through the content, focus on global skill development, or the 4 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication. Not just in terms of here's what we're doing, but here's how we're doing it, and here's the kids' evidence of that. So George Couros talks about every kid should graduate from high school with a digital portfolio. To me, that's huge, because that digital portfolio can be an example of their best work, but also be an example of the work in progress and process. So the kids can decide what's the best work, how does that look, and now they have a story to tell of their transformation over a 4-year period. To me, that's a focus on skill development. That's one. The second thing is, when you create your master schedule as a high school principal and with your team, it has to be student-centered. It has to be student-centered. So if kids are requesting courses, then you make a way for those courses to happen. And sometimes that changes the FTEs that you need. Sometimes it changes the number of sections people have. But ultimately, our schedule should meet the needs of the students, not the needs of the staff. And that is a very hard shift to make. But at the same time, if we have a student-centered master schedule that's focused on skill development with courses that are relevant to kids, then when you're onto something where the place is relevant, the kids find meaning, belonging, and they find value in that system. Then you can look at how do kids learn, and then ask questions about what do you learn most comfortable in. Is it a straight rows and hard desks and chairs, or is it comfortable informal seating? And then incorporate some of their ideas. So one of the things we did this year at New Albany is we put in a coffee shop in our school, and it's open from 7 o'clock in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. And kids are constantly going throughout the day, getting their teas, getting their coffees, things of that nature, because we want a relaxed environment where they can feel like they're at a Starbucks or the library, creating a really comfortable learning environment. We had some pushback, but we tried it for 9 weeks, got some positive feedback from students and staff, positive feedback from parents, so we tried it another 9 weeks. And now it's completely transformed the space. They brought in new countertops, and it looks really good. We have some student workers from our MRDD classrooms that are helping out. So it's an opportunity to build relationships, to build connections, and again, that create that sense of belonging and comfort for our students.
And I think Dwight brings up a pretty good point. He was one of the first individuals that I came across whose school was actually transforming learning spaces and environments to that were more student-centric. And I remember back in, when I came across Dwight and what they had done in Gahanna Lincoln High School in Columbus, Ohio, with Clark Hall. And I had the opportunity to visit Clark Hall and see for myself. I would want to be a student in that environment. And there's things that we take for granted, I think, that really make the difference. And research has shown that, classroom environment, everything from lighting, furniture, arrangement, color, acoustics can impact learning by as much as 25%, positive or negative. And in a public school, in a district where there were significant challenges, Dwight and his team not only persevered, they found innovative ways to make it happen. And I think that work we need to do a better job of showcasing, because there wasn't a district using the buzzword innovative. Everyone uses the word innovative. What does it really mean? What does it look like? And there, in terms of space and environment, you could see the tangible outcomes. Here's what innovative spaces look like. Let us show you. And that was back in, I believe, 2011, 2012. But now you look at school districts like Albemarle County, Virginia, where the county superintendent, Pam Moran, has collaboratively worked with her administrators and educators to transform their spaces in every single school, K-12. Again, talk about innovation. There's actual evidence of what it really looks like in practice. So, it just, and I think that's the power of social media, is that now we can learn from the best, which are, the Dwights, the Pams, and the other leaders and teachers and students that are doing incredible work up against all types of odds, but that are actually getting results and really giving us finally a definition of what innovation really looks like, what it means.
And Dwight, Clark Hall is probably the thing you get asked the most about, would be my guess, because it was such an innovative thought and you were able to put that into practice. So for those listeners out there that aren't familiar with what happened, can you just kind of walk us through and tell us a story about Clark Hall from, I guess, from the beginning to when you left that position?
Yeah, so from the beginning, it started around 2008, 2009. Actually, it's a 15-year process that led up to the culminating activity, which was building the Clark Hall. So there's extensive training. We had Tom McGusky come out and talk with our staff. We had Ian Jukes talk with the staff. We went through extensive understanding by design training. We went through the rigor relevance framework and Bill Daggett's work. So we did a number of things over a course of a 15-year period. We were at a point where, honestly, we were at capacity in the building. The kids, when we were surveying the kids, they said they loved Lincoln High School. They loved the diversity. They loved the curriculum, they loved the teachers, and the camaraderie that existed in the building. Positive school culture. Two things they didn't like: parking, which most high school students don't, and space. It was too crowded. So we had the school facility commission came in and saw that we were short by capacity of 70%, or over capacity by 70%. So we had to find a solution to meet the needs of our growing student population. We were near 2,500 students. The building obviously couldn't fit 2,500 students. We didn't want to build a second high school because of the expense. And when you build a second high school, you immediately divide the community, because when you build something new, automatically you have something old. And we didn't want that to exist for the community. This community spoke and said, we were one high school town, so this is where we want to stay. So then we had to think creatively, and there was a vacant Kroger building across the street from the high school. Busiest intersection in the city, which became one of the biggest concerns that we had to overcome. So instead of building a brand new high school with the same cafeteria, lockers, gymnasium, library, space in the hallways, there's a lot of real estate that's not used all 6.5 hours of the school day. So we had to think a lot differently and say, okay, what do we really need? But more importantly, what do the students of today need to learn? And what type of environment do they want to work in? So we talked to the kids. I got a group of about 25 to 30 teachers together, and we had major whiteboarding sessions, brainstorming sessions, and we just dreamt big. And our architect pushed us and we pushed him because we wanted to build a facility that didn't look like a typical high school, but more of a modern office space, and that met the needs, again, of today's kids. So we went through the design phase, and we thought about the finishes first. Colors on the wall, what type of furniture, what color the furniture, the flooring. We thought about all those finishes first, and then we said, how are we going to prepare the students for this type of environment? Because, again, students were going through one way of schooling for 10, 11, 12 years, and to put them in a brand new environment and say, okay, go learn, that doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work that way for adults. So we had to do a mind shift development towards what does teaching and learning look like in the 21st century in a collaborative environment where there's no bells, no desks and chairs. You have ottomans, you have soft seating, you have couches, you have carpet squares in a high school building. What does that really look like? And so we went through, again, continued the extensive training. We had parent groups, we had student groups, we had community groups, and honestly, people still didn't get it. But all the talking we did, all the images that we showed, all the drawings that we showed, people still didn't get it until they actually walked through the building. So on the day we broke ground, which is interesting, we had a tax levy on the ballot, and the day of the election is the day we broke ground. And the tax levy went down like crazy because it was poor timing. We didn't plan it that way, it just happened. So we were facing economic challenges while we're trying to build a brand new state-of-the-art innovative building. So pushback was huge. But we had a pretty strong support system that believed in what we were doing and believed in the vision, and we had some teachers that were all on board. Not everybody, but we had a core group. And we also made it a choice. If you want to teach in this environment, come talk about it. Let me hear your vision. Let's see what we can do together. So no one was forced to go over to Clark Hall, and we didn't make it a special building. We didn't decide the honors kids or the AP kids are going to go over there or a specific grade level. It was, here's your schedule. If it happens to be at Clark Hall, fine. If it's not, then it's fine too. So we wanted to really integrate that into the overall school community. So going through that process, we had an open house. It was finally finished, and we had probably 2,000 or 3,000 people come through, and we had grandparents coming in awe. It's like, I would love for my grandkids to go through this space. Parents came in, and it's like, okay, now we get it. And we took a group of seniors through before we actually finished it, and they finally got it. They didn't get it until they saw it. And what was interesting is that the kids wanted to see 2 spaces before they saw anything else. They wanted to see the bathrooms, and they wanted to see the stairs. Because those are 2 important places for the kids. I thought, of all the places, they wanted to see the bathrooms, and they wanted to see the stairs. The stairs were really wide and bright and open, and the bathrooms looked like a modern hotel that was nice and clean and fresh. And then they got to understand what we were doing in the classrooms, because 7 of the 14 classrooms over at Clark Hall don't have any desks. There's ottomans, there's chairs, there's maybe some cafe-style tables in the back, but the teachers can arrange it any way they want, and the kids learn that this is a very comfortable space. I can wear my hoodie, I can have my hat on, I can sit on the floor, I can roll around on this exercise ball, I can lay on the floor with my backpack as a pillow, or I can hang out in the hallway because the rooms are wide open. And so they got to understand what learning could be like in the 21st century. And here's how I knew we were on to something big. When I had juniors and seniors telling me, Mr. Carter, I feel like a young adult and I feel like I'm in college. And I said, well, how do you know? Because you've never been to college. They said, this is what we think college is like. There's responsibility, there's freedom, we have a lot of choice, you listen to us, and learning is fun. I was like, we're on it, we got it. And to this day, kids still love Clark Hall and the experience they were able to have because of the facility.
And you can go to just do a Google search for Dwight or for Clark Hall, and you can find some amazing photographs of what that space looks like. And Eric, this is probably a great segue to go into your most recent book of Uncommon Learning, because the innovation that Dwight's talking about is really the foundation for this second book.
Yeah, and I think it's a good segue to not only just uncommon learning, but also to model schools and the concept, because everything we're talking about, Greg, really is about creating these model schools for others to not necessarily replicate, but to take these strategies and ideas, adapt them to their own respective cultures, and create those schools that work for kids. So, first I'll just talk a little bit about the book, then I'll lead into model schools, if that's okay, and then I'll let Dwight piggyback, because there's everything we're talking about is going to be on display at the Model Schools Conference. But, the most important shift and change that we need to see in our schools is what's happening with student learning. Are we authentically engaging our kids in relevant ways that's meaningful, that allows them to not only see the meaning of what they're learning, but apply their knowledge, these skills, in rigorous ways? And with uncommon learning, it's really about taking these initiatives, ideas that you don't see in schools on scale, and begin to implement them in every classroom, in every school. So when we think about creating these schools that work for kids, what's uncommon? Uncommon is actually implementing technology with purpose, in which the technology is being utilized by students to support and enhance their learning. It's not being used as a direct substitute. It's not being used as a bells and whistles, smoke and mirror approach to engage kids. Because listen, let's be honest. Just because kids are engaged does not mean that they're actually learning. Students today, for the most part, know how to use technology. They don't know how to use technology to support high-level learning. And that's one of the many uncommon initiatives that I discuss in my book, is let's not just talk about technology and learning. All right? It's learning. How can technology be implemented in ways where there's going to be some substantial outcomes for our kids? And then we have to look at, Dwight talked about, we talked about space redesign, and how we can, begin to implement maker spaces. And one of the innovators in this, if not the innovator, is Laura Fleming, who I was fortunate enough to hire in New Milford. And Laura made me really good. And one of her colleagues right now from Pennsylvania, Travis, has been following along here as well. Travis Lape, and Travis, if I mispronounced your name, I'm sorry. They're working together, collaborating, helping other schools and districts across the country integrate maker spaces. How do we begin to implement mobile initiatives, bring your own device, one-to-one, where they're actually going to be successful in impact learning, looking at using micro-credentials, digital badging, to not just acknowledge professional learning of adults, but professional student learning outcomes. How do we create learning academies, smaller learning communities, which have nothing to do with technology, but everything about relevance and meaning and being applicable to real-world skills and passions of our kids? Academies is creating a school within a school that provides kids cohort models of learning based on this learning theory. So these are the sort of items, the issues that I talk about in common learning. But at Model Schools, hey, we got a guest. At Model Schools conference this year, this event is all about bringing together the 25 fastest improving schools in the country, the schools that are closing the achievement gap, the schools that are closing the digital divide, the schools that are effectively implementing technology and getting results. And I'm just going to add a few special features, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dwight, and he can elaborate on anything that I just talked about or whatever. But last year, for the first time, we had a working makerspace at Model Schools that was staffed by students. And we're going to have a makerspace again staffed by local students that is going to show the adults how important making is, how it can be tied to all the different concepts that they're learning across the curriculum. We are also, for the first time ever, we're not just going to talk about innovative learning spaces. We are going to transform learning spaces for attendees. So attendees during live sessions, are going to be able to learn in innovative spaces. And a lucky school or district will leave with their own innovative learning space, compliments of one of our sponsors. So, we're going to really not just we're going to show people what model schools look like. We are going to show through story, through practitioner success, through evidence, the schools that are not only doing the work, but are getting the results. And again, my pride is, helping to organize the digital aspects of the conference, but we're going to look at everything. The conference looks at everything from instruction to leadership to student learning. And that's why, the Model Schools is such an appropriate name for the conference because, and I want to make this one point before I turn it over, but the majority of the sessions, Greg, at Model Schools, they're run by the school districts themselves. Teams of educators and administrators together. They're the experts. They're showcasing their practitioner successes. They're the highlight of our conference. And you won't find another conference that puts the work of the collective, the work of the tribe, the work of schools, districts that are actually getting the results and making it happen.
And Eric, talk to us a little bit about how many years the Model School Conference has been going on and kind of the original thought process. I know it's been going on for 15 or 20 years now. How's it evolved and gotten better each year?
Yeah, this will be the 24th Model Schools Conference. Model Schools is part of Dr. Daggett, Bill Daggett's International Center for Leadership and Education. So Dr. Daggett, through ICLE, has been organizing the Model Schools Conference, obviously, for many, many years now. And the whole idea is, it's one thing to listen to a keynote from me, to listen to a keynote from Dr. Daggett and other thought leaders. And yes, there's value in that. But it's another thing to really, again, bring those motivational, inspirational, practical examples of not only the work that's being done, it's getting results, but articulating and walking through not just the highs, but the lows, showing the process, illustrating how even in districts where there might be challenges such as funding, mandates, directives, that change and success is possible. And I think that is what separates this event from every other event. And like I said, it's been around, as everyone knows, for a long, long time. But think about, I think that Model Schools really provides not just the motivation, but those immediate steps to begin to go back to schools, districts, and apply both in technology, non-technology areas to really create these systems that shouldn't just be models in our country, should be models for the entire world.
And Dwight, what are your thoughts on the Model School Conference? I know you're going to be there, and a lot of the things that, a lot of the practices that are going to be discussed are things that you obviously advocate for.
Right. Well, the Model Schools, as Eric said, the name is fitting because it's modeling what leaders want to do, ought to do, and what teachers and learners ought to be doing. And the framework in and of itself provides practical, hands-on strategies that you can use right away, right now, and see tangible results. Yes, I'll be there. I'll be co-presenting with my co-author Mark White. So we'll have a chance to talk about teaching Generation Z, transforming learning spaces by looking at global skills, looking at a 21st century mindset. What does it mean to be a learner in the 21st century? Asking questions, and which questions should we ask? So we'll be able to share, concrete examples of our process, but also processes of teachers and administrators from across the country. Similar to the digital learning book, it's more of a culmination of other people's stories that all tied into a similar framework of not just talking about transforming space, but actually transforming the space and having tangible evidence to show here how it looks, here's the process in which we used, and here are the results. And what I like most about the Model Schools Conference is just the vast number of people that come together from across the country that are like-minded, but also hungry to learn and try new things. And just you can walk away with more tools in your tool chest to go back to your school environment, knowing your climate, your culture, your DNA, and push and pull and encourage and motivate people to do things differently. And I think there's power in knowledge, and there's power in comfort in knowing other people have done it. Now it's not looking at something that's impossible. It's looking at, yes, it is possible, but here's how we can do it, or not but and here's how we can do it. I want to go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. And I just want to say, because what Dwight's saying is so important, is that, what, in school, we're supposed to model expectations for our kids and really be that sort of guide on the side, facilitator of learning. And at model schools, we're trying to, practice what we preach. And there's nothing more powerful than being in a session with your colleagues who have been in your shoes, that are in your shoes, and as Dwight said, can really not just inspire. There's a difference, I think, between inspiration and action. We want to inspire real action that's going to. Sorry for cutting you off, Dwight.
No, that's all good. You raise a great point. Being a practicing principal now and transitioning to a new district last year and having some significant challenges with that transition because of budgetary cuts and things of that nature, I was able to talk to other principals about leading change with less. Because the fact of the matter is, most districts are dealing with less money than we have in the past. We're dealing with fewer staff members, but we have more students. And the expectations are constantly increasing. So it's almost like, let's do more with a whole lot less. And that's not a reason to not innovate and change. So it's looking at what can you do within the box and within the constraints. If you think about design thinking, what are the constraints? What are the needs? And then how do you make those things happen within the resources that you have? And so being able to sit around after the sessions and talk to other building principals from across the country, be it urban, rural, suburban, whatever, you see some very similar problems that we're dealing with. But instead of massaging the problem, focusing on, but how do we solve it? And here's what I did. Here's how we handle it. Here's what you did. Taking it back home and then implementing those things. And you may fail, but you made progress because you tried something different. So I met some phenomenal people last year, like Lamont Rapollet from New Jersey. Phenomenal superintendent that is really transforming his district. He brought his entire team, and they are on fire. And they got a lot of their spark and motivation from just being at the Model Schools Conference and being encouraged and supportive and supported to say, let's do some good work. Here's a framework you can use. It's within their own personality, within the DNA of their school community, and they're flying high right now. So it was good to interact with groups of people like that. Obviously, you have Jimmy Cassis, who brings a huge team every year, and he talks about building a culture of excellence. And he'll give you everything that he has, and just here's the story, here's what we did, here's some practical strategies, and ultimately his story is you got to get the kids involved. Once you hook the kids, he shows you how to do it, and then he'll show you the results that he's gotten in the school.
And one of the things that I see on Twitter and social media throughout, particularly this school year, there's a lot of excitement out there about changing our learning spaces. And those folks that listen to the show on a regular basis know that I've talked about flexible seating. I've had Kayla Delzer on, who's just an awesome teacher, elementary teacher in North Dakota, and doing some amazing things with changing what the classroom and the schools look like. Even Glenn Robbins, our good friend from New Jersey, changing his hallways to idea streets. And these are really part of the original 7 pillars of digital leadership, Eric, that schools need to look different. Why can't they look more like a Starbucks or Google headquarters? And do you kind of feel the excitement that I feel? And then we'll let Dwight talk about his book a little bit and how he sees some of these things changing as well.
Yeah, you know what? I do feel the excitement, but I think that excitement has to lead. You can transform a space, you can transform a school, but if you don't have fundamental changes to teaching, learning, and leadership, guess what? You've invested a great deal of money in a space that's not going to lead to better learning outcomes for kids. So I'm excited because I believe in actually being looking at the research and understanding and seeing examples of how it does impact kids. We can't just, again, and I see this with technology as well, we can't just go all in and buy the stuff, because we need to make sure that those fundamental changes are improving at the ground level, so that when we do invest in new furniture, new technology, that the vision, the plan, and the means to evaluate are in place to ensure that it's going to get results. And as before Dwight talks about his piece on spaces, I do want to say, Greg, this message is for you and anyone else. I hope that you will submit an application to be a model school for next year's event. And as superintendent, you can do that. And anyone else that's listening, we encourage you, if you're doing innovative work, submit an application so that you, the true experts, can present about all the amazing things you're doing and how you're getting results with your kids.
Great. Dwight, tell us about the book.
Well, the book is a collaborative effort with the architect that helped us build Clark Hall and my then superintendent and mentor and great friend, Mark White. Mark White is the visionary of Clark Hall, and I had the fortunate opportunity to be the principal at that time, so I was responsible for the professional development and student engagement of the process. So we basically tell our story. Look at five strategies. The first one is teaching Generation Z. The second one is asking the right questions. The third one is understanding and transitioning to a 21st century mindset. And that's all about the adult behavior. And just with that a little bit more, as Eric talked about, you can transition a space and transform a space all you want, but if the mindset doesn't change, the space is just that. Think about the open school concept of the 70s. It was a great concept, but there was no professional development, no understanding of the why for that to happen. And within a decade, people were putting up portable walls to block off the open space concept. And it wasn't like it was a bad idea, it was just poorly implemented, and there was no outright plan to change how people looked at teaching, curriculum assessment, and instruction. We want to focus on teaching global skills and then allowing students, as Eric talked about and as we all know, allowing students to harness the power of technology. And so we basically go through our story, we go through our process, and then at the end of each chapter, it leads you to an action plan. So by the end of the book, you not only have the why, but you also have a what and a how with concrete examples, and then reflective questions to get you from point A to point Z by the time you finish the book. So it's not just a it's not just a picture book. I mean, we have pictures to demonstrate and model some of the space changes and transformations that we've talked about and that we're highlighting. But more so, it's about what are the questions we want to ask and get people to think about to change the mind. So the whole idea of the book is what's in your space between your ears, and what's in your space in terms of your learning environment. I'm excited about it. We got like almost 135, 140 pre-order copies. We have a school district right now that's very interested in the book in and of itself. So it's getting some really positive momentum. I think it's hitting at the right time as well. As schools are starting to think about next year, they're planning their budgets and hopefully they're thinking about learning space and reallocating their money to figure out how can we start with one classroom. Doesn't have to be the entire school. Start with the classroom, start with a hallway, start with a nook within the classroom. Just do something different with research to support it and explaining the why behind it. And I think our book will help encourage that type of thinking and that type of transformation and doing what's best for kids today. Not kids of yesterday, but kids today.
And as we think about creating schools that are best for kids, obviously we want to create a student-centered culture in which they have a voice and kids always come first. So that's kind of where I want to close the show tonight as we wrap it up. This will be the last question. And Dwight, I'll ask you first, and then Eric, I'll give you the chance to have a closing thought. But Dwight, you write a lot. A lot of folks read your blog. You do a wonderful job sharing your thoughts. But you talk a lot about Generation Z. And tell our listeners out there a little bit about this generation of kids and what can we do to meet their needs on a day-to-day basis.
Today's generation is technically called Generation Z, and some people question the start of that, but I say any kid that was born after 1990, they're part of Generation Z. Kids born after 1990 have grown up with touchscreen technology. They don't know life without the current technology that we have. They're entrepreneur in their spirits. They're somewhat cynical because of the economic downturn that we've gone through, because of terrorism and because of other acts that have occurred in our country. There's some cynicism there, but there's also a desire to live differently and to impact the world. They want to create, they want to make, they want to invent, they want to do something. They're very collaborative, but at the same time, they're also very private. And I say that because they looked at their older peers, the millennials, or sometimes their parents who made mistakes with posting pictures and things like that, and they don't want to repeat that. So they're going to more of the private social networking, Snapchat, WhatsApp, things of that nature that are still collaborative but very private. But also, they're curious. They want to know, and they have a lot of questions, and they want to do something different. They are a soundbite generation. Very short attention spans, 8 seconds, and they're moving on to something else. They skim just like most people do, but they skim in terms of like a pattern that's like on a screen of a menu, almost like an upside down L or an F. So we have to think about how kids learn and how do they consume information, and then how do they just have a desire to create information. They're connected. They know a world that's digital, and that's their almost an extension of their arm. And I always say this, and I heard this at an NASSP conference a couple years ago. They're not addicted to the device. They're addicted to the connection. They want to connect with their friends. So knowing all that about Generation Z, what does that look like in today's classroom? How do you create those same environments in the classroom and empower students to use the technology to learn and learn in a deeper, meaningful way? Not just social, but truly learning the global skills that we talked about. How are you using the technology to create, to collaborate, to think critically, and to communicate? So since students know how to use the technology socially, teach them how to use it for a learning capacity, and give them opportunities to share their learning and how they want to communicate their learning to authentic audiences. So if you as a teacher or a school, if you have a hashtag that you use via Twitter or Instagram, have students post their work there, and they can that's an authentic audience. If they know other people are going to see it besides the teacher or the principal, they're going to perform at a high level. And if they have a captive audience that's much more broad than within that classroom, yeah, kids are going to do some amazing things. They do it all the time. I have 2 concrete examples that exist right now at my school. We have, on this Saturday, we have a TEDx New Albany event, and it's the only TEDx event that's fully student run in the state of Ohio. It is going to be amazing. And these kids have done a fantastic job. The organization, the accountability, the responsibility that they're demonstrating, it far exceeds anything they're learning in the classroom, because they're able to apply the skills they're learning through the content, as I mentioned earlier. A second example, we have a young man who's actually using a 3D printer to create prosthetic arms and hands for other students who don't have that. He was born with half of his arm, and so he's used a 3D printer, worked with a local company, and he started his own company. Has a blog. His name is Aaron Westbrook, and his blog is Alive with 5. And he's doing some really powerful, creative things with the technology that we have today, how can we tap into people like Aaron and tap into kids like Stephen Kish and Sam Malik and Isla Lahudi who are leading TEDx? And we have three young men actually that started New Albany Young Business Leaders. Took the initiative and decided we want to hear from CEOs in a company or in our community. Let's bring them in, and they got a teacher on board, has an advisor. So these are kids that are taking the initiative and doing things that we only dreamt about. Probably didn't even come to our minds, I should say, when we were in school. These kids are doing it, and they're doing a great job at it. So how do we harness that type of creativity and desire and initiative to learn and capture that and keep it at the forefront of our classrooms every single day? So that's Generation Z.
And that's amazing, Dwight. And we all know that kids can do amazing things if sometimes the adults just get out of the way and give them an opportunity. So thanks for sharing that. Eric, what are some closing thoughts you have for us?
One quick thought, and then one plug for model schools again. You know, leadership is about action. It's not about position, title, or power. And you know what? The things that, you know, we're talking about, yes, we might have had titles and positions, but let's not be naive. Real change comes from the classroom level. It comes from our teachers. It comes from our kids. All great leaders know, understand, and embrace that. And what we have to do is build a culture of leaders where we're all on a level playing field, where we all have a single goal in mind, which is a pursuit of excellence in the digital age to create the best, relevant, meaningful, rigorous learning experiences for our kids. Understand that if we let our actions speak for our work, you know, that really is what leadership's all about. We talked a lot about model schools. The Model Schools Conference will be this June in Orlando, Florida. It will be 27th, 28th, 29th. You can go to modelschoolsconference.com and register. And like I said, if any listeners out there are your schools doing innovative work, please put in an application for next year. I'll be there. Dwight will be there. Jimmy Casas, Daisy Dyer Dewar, so many other innovative digital leaders. Tom Murray, who was on this show, but I'm thinking that Dwight and I did better than him. But you know, he'll be there as well, and a slew of other innovative educators, and most importantly, the teams of schools and districts. So that's my final thought.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for being here. This has been an amazing conversation, and this is going to be one of those shows where you go back and listen to it time and time and time again, so you can really hear a lot of the innovation that's happening and pick up on some of these best practices that are happening as you think about the Model School initiative. So thanks for being here, folks, and you certainly want to follow Eric Sheninger and Dwight Carter. They're doing amazing things, and be sure to catch us if you missed the live show tonight on iTunes and on Stitcher Radio. You can also watch us on YouTube, and you can always follow the show at my website at drgreggoins.com. So with that, have a great night, everyone, and thanks so much for listening to the Goin Digital Show.
Thanks, Greg.